Hello and welcome to the Gaggle, where we challenge and, if necessary, destroy media narratives. I'm George Samueli. With me today, of course, is co-founder of the Gaggle, Peter Lavelle. And as you pointed out a moment ago, Peter, it's now lighter than it was yesterday. Though when you look out on the street where it's pitch black at around about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, you can't see it. But the theory is that it is indeed brighter today than it was yesterday. But it is now our weekly live stream, Monday, 10 a.m. Eastern Time. Welcome everybody who has joined us. And I hope
On the eve,
wherever you are, it's a little bit brighter and nicer than where we are.
This is the eve before the eve.
The eve before the eve. So it's but for you, really, it's not really such a big deal. I mean, it's like
No, it's this. I just became aware of it. I mean, if you're going to be looking for that change, that's a fool's errand. That's waiting for Godot. No, the whole point is we're over the hump now. It'll every day will steadily get brighter, but there is also a downside of that, because if you live in a city like Moscow, like I do, then you need to have drapery that then the Russians say it. They don't say it in Russian; they say it in English. Blackout, where you want to have blackout during the summer because the sun comes up at 3 o'clock in the morning. Okay,
right, yeah, and that's right. Really, in Moscow as well. It's that north that it comes up at 3 in the morning. Huh.
at 3:30. Yeah, but it's in the dead of night, though it looks like it's not the dead of night. Okay, I like walking my dogs in the daylight, even though it's 5 o'clock in the morning. Okay, safety and stuff like that.
Right,
okay?
right. No, obviously, it's you have to think about safety. So some we can just go through some household duties, some news items that appeared today. President Biden has commuted many federal death sentences, obviously in anticipation of Trump's arrival and the expectation that Trump will carry out the executions. What was strange about the commutation is that he didn't commute the death sentences of those who have been convicted of terrorism, in particular the Boston Marathon bombers, which I find very puzzling, because if you're going to make an issue out of the death penalty because you think it's morally,
and make an issue of it.
Yeah, I mean, then it has to be no death penalty for anyone. I mean, that has to be the logic of the position. If you're in principle against humans having the right to put to death another human, which is always ridiculous, since you sanction wars all the time. But nonetheless, if you are going to make that argument, then you have to be consistent. And consistency means that even if we had captured Hitler and put Hitler on trial, we would not have executed him. You have to be consistent. You say, well, would you execute Hitler? And if you say, yeah, well, I'd make an exception, well, that means you're not in principle against the death penalty. But if you say, yeah, I would absolutely let Hitler live out his days in life imprisonment, then at least you're being consistent.
Yeah, I mean, I'm against the death penalty, but I'm very much torn by it as well. Yeah, in the heat of the moment, emotion, you see some of these horrific crimes. You don't even want to describe them. It's too horrific. But there are people put to death that were not guilty. Okay, and I just don't think the state should be in the business of killing people. Okay, I mean, if you want to kill people, kill foreigners. I mean, I'm sorry.
That's the problem, and that of course is the problem, because yes, no, if you sanction war, then you are basically sanctioning the taking of human lives, and whether they're foreigner or not. I mean, if you're going to make this a moral argument that I'm against the death penalty, I'm against putting to death another human being, then I think you have to be also against war. I mean, there has to be a consistency in these positions. I mean, if you, I remember the Roman Catholic Church. I mean, has basically, well, it's against the culture of death. So it said, well, we're against the death penalty, we're against abortion, were against assisted dying, and presumably they're also, in principle, against war. But at least you're being consistent. But if you say, yeah, I'm against death, but I'm in favor of abortion, and I'm perfectly happy with launching all kinds of wars all the time and bombing people who have never done any harm to me, then I just don't believe that this is a principled position. It just sounds good. Hey, I can get into the liberal clubs because I'm against the death penalty. Hey, I'm a cool liberal. I'm against the death penalty.
Yeah, I agree with you. And even during these very troubled times, we should work towards banning war eventually. I know that sounds like pie in the sky and everyone, okay, and I'll take my lumps for it, but it should be the goal, shouldn't it? Shouldn't we work towards it? Okay. And in these troubled times here, we have anything but peace. Okay, but with Joe Biden, I mean, he's just the worst vessel possible. I mean, it's a guilty conscience. So much of the incarceration in the United States, and I think only China rivals the United States in levels of incarceration. And plus, and let's speak the truth. A lot of these are minority people to the majority. So. There's something wrong with the criminal justice system. Obviously, it's not the people; it's the system. Okay, so it doesn't mean I'm easy on crime. As a matter of fact, I'm kind of the reverse. I think deterrence does work. What did Giuliani call it? The broken glass. You throw
the broken window was a little bit different. I mean, the broken window theory was that if you allow conditions to deteriorate, in other words, if you allow windows to be unfixed and basically everything just going downhill, then ultimately crime will thrive. So that's what the theory was, that somehow broke. I mean, he didn't come up with it. I mean, it was an academic. I think it was James Q. Wilson who came up with the theory of the broken windows, which is that that you have to repair the window. The moment the window is broken, you repair it, and then you keep up that helps to upkeep the neighborhood, and therefore there will be no crime. But once you allow the broken window, then there's a broken door, and then and then people start defecating outside, and then that's when you've got a scene in which crime will thrive.
Well, I mean, the reason why I bring it up is that where I live in Russia now, like 27 years now, and in the first few years I lived here, crime was a really big problem.
Right.
Okay, you can even see the legacy of it to this day. Is when people refurbish their apartment or finish off the word in Russian is remont, and George knows that, and I'm so used to that word that that's the first word that comes to my mind. We have these huge, thick metal doors. Everybody's got thick metal doors with triple locks, and that's a legacy not of the Soviet Union, but of the 1990s, where crime was rife and rampant and terrifying. I saw it with my own eyes, and I had a couple brushes with it as well. And but if you go down the main streets of Moscow, you got to kind of look high and low to see if there's a cop around. There, you don't see it. Okay, it's not a high crime environment. Okay, why? Because you break the law, 99% conviction rate. Mm-hmm. You will go to prison.
Right.
And then because we have what's an internal passport, I know libertarians have a hard time with it. I'm actually for it. I think, you should be able to prove who you are. If you go to prison, you get a stamp. You have been in prison. That follows you your whole life.
Right.
No rehabilitation stuff here. No. Just don't do it. Right. Just don't do it.
Right.
Okay?
Yes.
And so and I'm not trying to cheer on particularly the way the Russians do, but I'm just saying there are incentives and all of that. In the United States, I mean, people that commit nonviolent crimes go to prison. That's just, come on.
Well, I mean, I think that one has to be a little bit careful about that, because often it's brought up about the issue of drugs, or people go to prison for drugs, but that's a little misleading, because what normally happens, and the way it works in the American system, and that isn't true in most other systems, It's the plea bargain system. So let's say you're caught robbing a 7-Eleven. Now, that it may be that it's your first time that you did it, but nonetheless, you're caught, and you're caught even with a gun, and you held up on 7-Eleven. Well, what they could do is, charge you with that, and then you're looking at prison for 15 years. Or they can find that, you also had drugs in your pocket, and instead of charging you with the armed robbery, they're going to charge you with the drugs, but you still have to do time. But then it'll be, commensurate with that guilty plea. So it's not quite true that, if you have marijuana, you're going to get arrested and sent to prison. I mean, you go down to the streets of any city in America, you smell marijuana everywhere.
Everywhere.
Everyone's quite happy with it, so no one really thinks that they're going to be sent to prison for it. But it's a way that they work with the plea bargain. I don't think the plea bargain system is such a great idea, but it's part of the
I don't either, because
you do the plea bargain.
Or particularly, let's keep with George's analogy. You stick up a 7-Eleven, they get you red-handed, videotaped everything, okay? And then the detective reads you your rights and say, oh, by the way, across the street was the bank. It got robbed last week. You know anything about that? Well, I might know something. Oh, okay, well, maybe some things can go away. It gets so, these are Netflix series and stuff like that. But it's the thing with drugs. I know this sounds really kind of amateurish, but why is there such a desire and need for illicit drugs? Okay.
Well,
I mean, because it's a culture of despair.
Yes.
A culture of despair. I mean, you can all think, in the more violent sections of Los Angeles and New York, the gangs and war and guns and all that. No, I mean, what about the fentanyl epidemic in Middle America? Okay,
right. No, that's right. Well, there's no question. I think that, but I think that's why I've never been particularly sympathetic to the libertarian argument on drugs, because I think drugs are terribly destructive to human lives. I mean, just so many lives are destroyed through drugs, so many families destroyed. And it's such an easy argument, such an easy cop-out for the libertarian to say, well, let's just decriminalize it. Hey, let's have it, we'll stop, and then we'll stop sending people to prison, and we'll stop, just do it. And oh, that's so easy to do. Why didn't I think of that? I mean, but the fact is that what's going to happen is that it'll destroy many lives. And of course, it'll be a huge burden on the health system, because somebody's going to have to deal with it. I mean, they're not going to just let you die on the street of a drug overdose. Somebody's going to have to go and treat you and then try to take you off the drugs and whatever. So somebody's going to have to pay for it. And so it's very peculiar for the libertarians to come up with this argument when they don't really address the issue of who's going to pay for it. Because after all, the whole issue was smoking, why they finally got the tobacco companies, after all the years the governments were going after the tobacco companies and they couldn't get them, was they said, hey, you're imposing a burden that everybody else has to pay for. If I'm not a smoker, but I have to pay for the cancer treatment of the smoker, or the emphysema, or the heart disease of the smoker, why should I have to pay for it? So the tobacco companies, are going to have to chip in a lot of money for the state governments for the treatment that you have caused.
Yeah, well, sickness is a good is a lucrative business in America, because you don't have state healthcare; it's all private. I will just kind of show just so old-fashioned that I am. I remember, and this is something when I was very young, not when I wasn't an adult, but I remember growing up in Colorado. You're like 17, 18, you get into a scrap. Maybe you're stealing the wheel covers and hubcaps and stuff like that, getting a scrap with the police. They rough you up, literally, and then they take you in front of a judge. And the judge says, look, young man, you've got a future, but you abused your liberty. So we're going to send you to the military. No, we're going to give you the option of going to the military, or you can go to prison. It's up to you.
Right.
And they took the military. And the military can knock you around a bit and straighten you out. I know growing up, That happened to some people, and they were much better for it.
Right,
Okay.
right,
But
right.
we don't live in those times
No,
anymore.
no.
Going back to the circle back, Joe Biden, your legacy is done, dude. I know you can do all you want.
Right.
Okay, you're indelibly stamped as being a moron, a liar, a slob, and an engineer of wars and genocide. Good riddance, you slob. And one thing that makes me happy thinking about the future is that we had Donald Trump, Joe Biden, and then Donald Trump. You are bookended by Donald Trump. Gives me a sense of pleasure. Okay, not being a big Trump supporter, but there's one thing I can say for sure is that Joe Biden, by every single definition and metric, was the worst president of my life.
And speaking of Donald Trump, as he sees won't, Trump tends to put the cat among the pigeons. And over the last 48 hours, he has really put the cat among the pigeons because he suddenly suggested that the United States is going to take over Panama. And we'd all thought, oh,
And also, he's
that issue is
reconsidering.
kind of over and done with because Jimmy Carter signed 1977. He's basically signed over the Panama Canal and the zone to Panama, and then that came into effect in 1999. And so basically, for the past 25 years, Panama, the Panama Canal has been under the control of the Panama government. And now suddenly Trump has raised this issue that, well, I don't know. I mean, I don't think it's a great deal for the United States. And what's kind of interesting. Well, anyway, let's first take a look at what he did, because
As George is looking for it, apparently he's floating buying Greenland
that's
again.
another thing. Exactly, that's another issue that he suddenly raised. And let's see. So this was it. He sent this out. No, that's not it. Always what a pain in the neck to do. Yeah, this is it. So this is he's on his Truth Social, and he sends this out, and he says the Panama Canal is considered a vital national asset for the United States due to its critical role to America's economy and national security. A secure Panama Canal is crucial for U.S. commerce and rapid deployment of the Navy from the Atlantic to the Pacific, and drastically cuts shipping times to U.S. ports. The United States is the #1 user of the canal, with over 70% of all transits heading to or from U.S. ports. Considered one of the wonders of the modern world, the Panama Canal opened for business 110 years ago and was built at huge cost to the United States in lives and treasure. 38,000 American men died from infected mosquitoes in the jungles during constructions. Then, well, no, go back. What happened there?
Okay, George, as you're doing that,
Yep.
why now? What's going on with Panama?
Well, I think what I think is
broke.
go on.
We need to fix it.
Well, I think this is part of his agenda. I think it's part of his, he's got 4 years to do everything that is within his capability of making America great.
How does that make America great?
Well, that's where it gets kind of interesting, because his point about Panama, I mean, that basically Panama, it got this great deal from the United States, and that Panama hasn't been much of an ally to the United States. I think that's a reasonable one, and I think that's probably where this is going. Though I wouldn't necessarily think that he isn't going to take it over. I think he may do so, but I think initially he's going to apply maximum pressure against Panama. So Teddy Roosevelt was president of the United States at the time of its building and understood the strength of naval power and trade. When President Jimmy Carter foolishly gave it away for $1 during his term in office, it was solely for Panama to manage, not China or anyone else.
Okay, well, so it's the China thing.
Well, that's one aspect of it, yeah, the China thing. But another aspect of it is that basically Panama has been charging exorbitant rates, far beyond what the markets provide, because it's been restricting the shipping through the canal. He says, well, because it's a very peculiar thing. The Panama Canal, they use fresh water. It's not salt water. So they say, well, we got to get this fresh water. The reservoirs are getting dry, and then so we need a slap on an additional fee, a fresh water fee. And then they say there's a premium if you want to get your ship across. Then that's going to cost you extra. There's a premium transit fee. So they've been making a lot of money. And then
wouldn't Trump do that with one of his hotels if he could?
He probably absolutely could. But that's why he thinks that, hey, but we're the United States. You're Panama. You don't screw us over. We screw you over. Like Mo Green in The Godfather. You don't buy me out. I buy you out.
Yeah, you guineas. Yeah. One of the greatest scenes in film history is one of my. I've seen it 1,000 times, maybe more. I love that scene. Okay. I don't know, George. With so much on his plate, I mean, Panama is moving up in the queue, huh?
But look, it looks like it. But I think that whatever. Let's just go on, because it got quite funny.
I mean, one of the things, and I'm not supporting this. I think it's just a distraction. But if someone's already mentioned realist politics, well, in a weird way, and I mean, and this has nothing to do with international law, but I mean, this is creating a fortress Western Hemisphere, and this is what I think some of the people around him are thinking.
Well, I think so, and I think that's why I think it's quite interesting, because of how Trump views the world. Now, we've talked a lot about Ukraine, and I think it probably is true that he doesn't see any great benefits to the United States in Ukraine. I mean, it's clear that this is much more of a Democratic Party thing, a George Soros thing, Biden thing. They're obsessed with Russia, obsessed with trying to destroy Russia. He just doesn't see any benefit to the United States being there. It's dangerous. You're getting into a confrontation with Russia. Why do it? What are we getting out of it? But here, he thinks this is where we're going to plant our flag, which here in South and Central America.
And it's doable.
And it's doable, exactly. You're up against adversaries that are going to be a pushover. The United States invaded Panama in 1989 under the older Bush, and it was an easy to do thing. But anyway, I just want to finish this thing with Trump's his I don't know, truths, because anyway, exorbitant. He says there. Not China or anyone else. It was likewise not given for Panama to charge the United States, its Navy, and corporations doing business within our country exorbitant prices and rates of passage. Our Navy and commerce have been treated in a very unfair and injudicious way. The fees being charged by Panama are ridiculous, especially knowing the extraordinary generosity that has been bestowed to Panama by the U.S. This complete ripoff will immediately stop. The United States has a vested interest in the secure, efficient, and reliable operation of the Panama Canal, and that was always understood. We would and will never let it fall into the wrong hands. So again, that's bigger China. Yeah, exactly. Okay. It was not given for the benefit of others, but merely as a token of cooperation with us and Panama. If the principles, both moral and legal, of this magnanimous gesture of giving are not followed, then we will demand that the Panama Canal be returned to us in full and without questions. To the officials of Panama, please be guided accordingly. And he sends this out.
Yeah, you got a nice canal here.
That's right. Welcome to the United States Canal. Yes, exactly. It's a nice canal here. I think we'll call it the United States Canal. And then the president of Panama responds to Trump's threats, and he says every square meter of the Panama Canal belongs to Panama and will continue belonging to Panama. And then Trump sends this out and says, we'll see about that. Uh, so, um,
Oh God, George. So we have a genocide going on in Gaza. We have the disappearance of the sovereign state called Syria. We have foreign troops uh, all over the place. We have a black flag over Damascus. Israel is about to take over the West Bank, and Jordan, if that does happen, Jordan will collapse. So, and Donald Trump is focused on Panama.
but that, it certainly makes sense. I mean, he's at least focused on issues that matter to America. I mean, it's not on issues that are
I mean, can't you
thousands
just
of miles away. I
negotiate?
mean, it's a perfectly legitimate argument. I mean, if you're going to be like saying "Make America Great Again," America first, he said, "Okay, well, this is where I'm interested," and he did that in his first term when he talked about, "Oh, I think we're going to bring back the Monroe Doctrine." I think he even
Well, the
invoked the
Monroe
Monroe
Doctrine never has always been in operation. Okay, George, I've already posited the realist perspective here. Okay, also it would be an easy win. It's kind of cheap. Have there been any negotiations with the Panamanian
No,
authorities?
but that's where it gets quite interesting because he's going to raise this issue with Panama. Obviously, this business, these fees, says, hey, these fees are ridiculous, and you're doing it basically. You're gouging by bringing up this drought, and you don't have any fresh water, and then you get this premium rates for those who give you extra cash. But then there's also the immigration thing because he's saying basically these migrant caravans are going through the Darien Gap between Panama and Colombia, and Panama is not exactly helping the United States. Basically, Panama is waving them through and making money off these the mules who are facilitating this caravan trail. So I think he's going to bring that up with in any negotiations. He's going to bring up the issue of the drug trade, all the drugs that are going through Panama. Um, and then I think he's going to bring up the issue of all these ships that are registered, these Panamanian registered ships that basically can get around American labor and tax and shipping laws. I think Panama is going to have a hard time. I mean, when he comes along and focusing on this, I think Panama is going to be up against it. And I mean, I'm not saying he's going to invade and take it over, but I think these are going to be difficult negotiations.
Well, let me get here. So at the end of the year here on December 23rd, let me get my pen out. This is a to-do list. It's already accumulating. Okay, Panama. Own up on Panama. Okay. I know all of the dates that have been mentioned, the names and all that, but if we're going to do Panama again, we're going to do a deep dive, and I'm going to be prepared. It's on the list. Okay. I just did. Everybody, George and I do these things cold. I had no idea he was bringing up Panama as our first thing.
Well, but that's the skill of Trump, is that he brings these things up, which nobody had been thinking about, because it's like, well, what the hell? And then
Peter, Panama, what?
What? Exactly. We're talking about Israel, we're talking about Gaza, Jordan, or whatever. No one's been talking about Panama, and he suddenly brings it up. And he doesn't just bring it up and then forget about it. He persists with this. And he does it in a way deliberately calculated to annoy the
just like a landlord would.
Yes, exactly, like a landlord. And he suddenly sends out this this truth. Welcome to the American Canal. and then there's this president. He says, every inch of it is belongs to us. Well, we'll see about that. I think it's.
Serious, George. I mean, is this a opening parlay?
I would have thought so. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. But it shouldn't be ruled out. An invasion should not be ruled out. I mean, it's a relatively easy job. I mean, they did it in '89. It took just a few days. I mean, I think there were quite a lot of casualties. I think a lot of Panamanians were killed. But that was, I mean, it was real arrogance. I mean, they went in just to take out Noriega. I mean, Noriega, they went in, they seized him, hauled him back to the United States, dumped him in a federal prison in Florida, and he stayed and died there. I mean, that was so. You know, people, are shocked and horrified by what Trump says, but they didn't seem that troubled by what George H.W. Bush did, back in '89.
Yeah, I'm sure someone's waiting in the wings, or someone's being prepared to take over power in Panama and sign whatever treaty that Donald Trump wants. I mean, this is not a hard one, George.
Right.
I mean, is it right? Is it? We could talk about that, but I mean, as far as if that's your goal, it just seems to me it just kind of really small potatoes considering what's going on in the world right now. But I strongly believe my first reaction is, Fortress America. And I think there are people around Trump that are they're saying, this holy war against Russia and all this is nonsense. Okay. We can still get the defense dollars for Fortress Western Hemisphere. Okay. And the argument about Navy ships from the Atlantic to the Pacific, I thought we had different, fleets,
Right.
Okay. It doesn't.
Yeah, no, and there's no evidence that at any time Panama raised any kind of difficulties or anything at all, transiting from the Atlantic to the Pacific or anything like that. I think it's just, hey, we don't like ripping it up, but of course also it is about pushing China out of Latin America. Basically they don't want any kind of Chinese presence in Latin America. I mean, I think that's clearly indicating.
This is what it's really about. This message is not necessarily being sent to Panama. They already know the issues that the Americans have. The Americans are not shy about it, okay? Particularly corporations that use that transit here. This is all about China, and this is a shot across the bow for the Chinese to back off. Chinese have been remarkably successful in South America.
Right, exactly. They've invested a great deal.
Yeah.
I think, yeah.
Down. I don't remember. You probably came across it too. Was it the Colombia or something? And the U.S. was sending like a transit system down to Colombia and everything, and Blinken was all gloating about it. Well, these are like a transit system from California that doesn't work or hasn't worked for 30 years. They're pulling the cars out of storage. They don't even know if they're going to work, and they're going to send it down as a gift. Okay.
Right.
Well, the Chinese just say, look, we will build you 21st century metro transportation. We have our own contractors. We have our own labor. We'll keep, we feed our people. We house our people. They don't want to have any the local economy.
Right, but at the same time, we have to say, that's easier said than done. Whether China does actually deliver. I mean, that's what China promised.
They do infrastructure.
Has that really been delivered? Because that whole Belt and Road Initiative is still mostly kind of big talk rather than actual reality.
Not in Central Asia. It's going around on with a great pace. I mean, going into Europe, you're absolutely right. Going into connecting. I mean, there are separate infrastructure projects are how they're connected. You're right. That's slow going. I agree with you. But in the Asia heartland, it's moving apace. Okay, it's the biggest mega project since Rome.
Right, but it requires a lot of capital, and we have to see whether China has that. But it also essentially China has to make money on this as well. So it's a great idea, but we have to see whether it actually does work out. I mean, China has some serious economic issues. So
well, I mean, the perspective is so very different. I mean, and this is just the nature of two different systems, looking for a return on an investment as soon as possible. This project is not built that way. Okay. It's much more long-term. I mean, even to the point, everyone, where I guess it was 2 or 3 years ago now, the U.S. State Department was complaining to Israel that the Israelis were getting a little too close to the Chinese with ports and things like that. It is moving apace, George. Okay. I think it was in Greece. They got the port because the Greek authorities couldn't pay off their debt. I mean, This is incrementalism, but incrementalism over time counts. Okay, the U.S. has nothing remotely like this kind of development program for any part of the world. They don't even do it in the United States, for God's sake. Okay, I'm not trying to overrate it, but I'm not going to underrate it. Okay, but I do think, going back to our discussion on Panama, this is all about China. I think with Panama, you can fix things, or you just invade it. Okay, I mean, the policy mix is not hard to figure out here.
Right. No, I think so. But I think that the way the United States is going to play it within the next 4 years under Trump's term, I think they're going to start leaning on as many countries as possible, particularly in Latin America, basically cut your ties with China. I mean, I think that's going to be that's going to be the pressure that's coming from Washington. And this is the first step. And the other thing is, what you mentioned is the Greenland thing, which he brought up during his first term. It was kind of surprising. Again, he came out of nowhere where he suddenly mentioned Greenland, and then he did this again the other day. Let me again dig this up.
Okay, as you're getting that, I'm getting more water. Go ahead.
Good. So here, this is what he said here, and then yes, here he says, "I am pleased to announce Ken Howry as my choice for United States ambassador to the Kingdom of Denmark. Ken is a world-renowned entrepreneur, investor, and public servant who served our nation brilliantly during my first term as U.S. ambassador to Sweden, where he led efforts to increase defense, security, and economic cooperation between our countries. As a co-founder of PayPal and venture capital fund, Founders Fund, Ken turned American innovation and tech leadership into global success stories, and that experience will be invaluable in representing us abroad. For purposes of national security and freedom throughout the world, the United States of America feels that the ownership and control of Greenland is an absolute necessity. Ken will do a wonderful job in representing the interests of the United States. Thank you, Ken, and congratulations." Let's just read that again. The United States, for purposes of national security and freedom throughout the world, the United States of America feels that the ownership and control of Greenland is an absolute necessity. So he's returned to that subject. Denmark is not going to do it. But again, it depends on how much pressure Trump is willing to apply. I think he's going to be this term. He's going to be applying some serious pressure. I mean, what we saw in the first term was, I thought, is quite mild in comparison to what I think he's going to do in this term. I think he's going to apply real pressure against Denmark. Now, then the question is, what if he offers a big bucket full of money? Would Denmark still say no? I don't know. I mean, why? What does anyone say? I mean, what do you need Greenland? What does Denmark need Greenland for? So if America offers a real serious chunk of change, why would Denmark say no?
I don't know. But what comes to mind first is it's something you said a few seconds ago. Well, Trump was president for 4 years, and he dealt with the Europeans. He has no respect for them at all.
No.
And that's why I think this has popped into, partially why this has popped into his head. Because, I already know these people. They're nobodies, okay? Right. And at the end of the day, they're going to do exactly what they're told, okay? So if the United States wants Greenland and the EU, well, this is all this kind of, well, who are you people? Yes. You've already shown your mettle.
Yes.
You're nobodies.
That's right.
So if is it right or wrong? I'm not going to go there at this point in time. If that's what the U.S. wants, it will get what it wants, okay? And it doesn't care what the Europeans say. You love Ukraine so much, go ahead and pay for it, okay? We're more interested in the Arctic, which you should be, everybody.
Right.
You should be. Who's ahead of the game? Russia's number one by far in the Arctic.
Yeah, yeah. And but that's something again. That's something Americans are going to be looking at. That's the way the Americans think. Then this is, hey, Russia is way ahead of us in the Arctic. We got to get in on the Arctic.
I'm trying to remember this correctly, and I'm not doing this just for a laugh. But it's something, like in the year 2000. No, it was even maybe 2020. The Canadians were considering calling the Russians to help, asking them to send an icebreaker to help get the Canadian icebreaker out of the ice.
Right.
That's how embarrassing it is. And also, what Russia is doing is working very, very closely with China. China covets a spot in the sun because it's always sunny there. They want to be part of the Arctic too, and the Russians are their way into it. Okay? And the United States is very aware of it. The Canadians, in theory, should be a major player because it's the Russia and Canada. They have the lion's share of the entire Arctic because of Alaska. The U.S. is in the game in a big way. Alaska is not small. Okay,
yeah, exactly. Alaska is not small, exactly.
Greenland is Denmark.
But Greenland is also in itself very rich in mineral deposits. Plus, in its ocean shelf, there's a lot of oil and gas under Greenland. So it's a really rich resource. And then if you look at Denmark, it says, yeah, but you're a tiny country. You're not going to be able to exploit these resources. We, the United States, we have gigantic resources, and we can exploit Denmark. I mean, we can exploit Greenland. We might cut you in for a percentage. But basically, it's ours. I mean, it's
yeah, but 3%. What do you say?
Yeah, we'll get you exactly. You get a percentage. We'll give you a lump sum now plus a percentage
and
the revenue.
And when we have this trans-Arctic company, it'll be very well funded. Its headquarters, and you're guaranteed a seat at the table.
That's right. That's right.
Let me take back 2%. 2%.
That's right. That's right. So I think that he's gonna do this seriously. I think I don't know if he's going to succeed, but I think he will apply some serious pressure against Denmark. I think a pressure against Panama. And the whole immigration thing. I mean, this is again. I mean, China is obviously an important consideration when it comes to Latin and Central America, but there's the immigration thing. These things basically we're getting screwed over. All these countries are taking part in this this caravan trail of mass immigration. I mean, and he says it's not a friendly act, and it's an unfriendly act when you
if the
immigration into the United States.
If the United States would stop meddling in Central American countries, maybe they wouldn't be moving. But that's a different topic. Okay,
right.
They don't want to. I mean, I thought Kamala Harris was supposed to look at the core,
the root causes.
The root causes. The root causes is American imperialism, trying to dominate the Western Hemisphere, and this is what you get. You get migration. Okay, I've said repeatedly here is that a Venezuelan guy taking his young family and want to go to America. I don't blame him. I don't blame him at all. Okay, I take care of my family too because the United States has made Venezuela unlivable. Okay, so let's look at root causes. I really get angry when people. They don't look at the entire argument. I'm for building the wall. Yes, I am. I've said that from day one. But I think you should stop meddling in their economy. Maybe give Venezuela back its gold.
Right. But I think that both things are true. I think it's wrong to meddle in other countries' affairs. It's wrong to bomb, weaken, sanction other countries. But it's also wrong to have to put up with mass migration, and I think that applies to the Middle East. So it's both things are wrong. It's wrong to meddle in the Middle East and make life unlivable for so many people in the Middle East, but it's also wrong to subject the peoples of Europe and the United States to mass migration. In other words, the populations are being punished, even though they hadn't made any of those decisions, either in Latin America or in the Middle East.
Yeah, well, the Syrians are going to start flooding into Europe again. Presumably, they weren't keen on leaving their homes, but they had to because they were destroyed, and nobody in Europe got to vote on it. Okay, there's a lot of losers all the way around here.
Right. No, that's right. So I think, you know, if we're looking at the Trumpian agenda, we could say, okay, he's going to apply pressure here. I think we'll see about the Denmark. Then I think he's going to apply pressure against Iran. No question. He's going to go back to that whole maximum pressure campaign of his first term. He regards that as a job that he had left undone. And something that over Israel and all his Zionist allies would scream with delight at. So they're going to go after Iran. They absolutely, you know, apply this maximum pressure campaign against Iran. I mean, we've obviously talked a great deal about Ukraine and what he's going to do there, and that's the one that's up in the air, because, as we just said, it's not really his prime interest. On the other hand, he's in the swamp, in the Washington swamp. It is preoccupied and obsessed with Russia and Ukraine, and he has to swim in that swamp.
Yeah, well, as I told you on Sunday, I wrote it down. I agree. George is having a very kind of global view, and I think he's absolutely right. And the Ukraine exception, maybe Ukraine is an exception. It's not even a done deal that it is an exception. It's a maybe.
Exactly. It's not a done deal. It's going to be very difficult to get to do a deal.
Oh, no. Look, everybody here. Okay, it's December 23rd, 2024, the eve before the eve. You hear it here right now. Trump's policy is going to vary very little from Biden's. You heard it here. Okay.
I think so, and yeah, I think that's very true, and I think it is true that there's a remarkable consistency in U.S. foreign policy. I mean, there's the consistency. Biden continued with Trump's policies. I mean, he promised he was going to change, but essentially, he continued and exacerbated. It was Trump who basically greenlit the lethal weaponry for Ukraine, and of course, Biden greatly inflated that. On the question of Iran, after all the talk about returning to the joint plan of action.
From day one of the Biden administration, George and I said this is a farce. It's never going to go anywhere.
Right. Exactly. The tariffs, again, all the criticism of the tariffs, Biden retained the tariffs. So, yeah, I mean, there's a remarkable consistency, and that's why it's that these people just move from think tank to administration, back to think tank, back to the Fox News studios, to NBC studios. It's the same group of people. There's no real distinction between them.
And remember, Trump on the campaign said, "Drill, baby, drill." Remember? Well, it's been the mainstream media doesn't like to cover it because Joe Biden came in and cut all of these licenses and projects and pipelines. By the end of his administration, he'd basically done a 180. Okay, though because he was making a fool out of himself and a hypocrite. What mainstream media didn't like covering it, but. Right. Drill, baby, drill is actually the reality in the waning months of the Biden administration, and Trump is only going to he's going to do it with much fanfare, of course. But I think we're onto something here. This kind of fortress mentality, and the Europeans are an extension of Fortress America. That's the way how these. People around Trump.
That's exactly how Trump sees
it. They don't have agency. They don't deserve agency. They're an unsinkable aircraft carrier. They're an outpost. Okay, and that's about as far as the argument goes. We had a German scholar on months and months ago. And he was pondering how Trump will treat Europe, and you and I kind of disabused him. He said he doesn't care.
Right. That's right. Exactly.
If it doesn't do something for as he believes for America, and most importantly for his legacy,
Yeah.
in one ear out the other. It's just
Right.
noise.
No, that's exactly right, and he said that that was last week. He said, you know, unless you buy lots and lots of oil and gas from us, we're going to really hit you with tariffs. I mean, you've got to become energy dependent on us. Otherwise, we're going to hit you with tariffs. I mean, can you imagine being so contemptuous of your allies when you say you need to become dependent on us? You need to purchase all of your energy needs from us. So so much for all we're very concerned about Europe becoming excessively dependent on Russian energy. Ooh, but it's okay if you become dependent on American energy.
And the rules-based order.
That's right.
Yeah.
So
it's what's interesting about this. Again, I'm not going. I agree or disagree. And so much of analysis is you don't really have to weigh in on if you think it's a good idea or a bad idea. That's fine if you want, but this is what great powers do.
Yep.
Great powers do this. Okay, they see a piece of real estate, an asset that will enhance their deterrence and their relative power on the world stage. You're going to snatch it away. Now, there'll be armies of people that will rationalize, they're not using the resources. They don't have the money. Okay. They'll go on and on and on preaching about it. Okay. But, if you see Russia as an independent player that is energy rich, and I always want to stress this to people, water rich. Water is becoming more and more of a strategic asset as the climate changes. And it's just denial. You're denying other great powers this asset. That's what it's all about.
Yeah, no, that's right.
Do I agree or disagree with it? That's a different conversation.
Well, that's the thing. Well, that's with Trump, for him, it's all about doing everything to advance America. Whether it's America's coal, America's oil, gas, steel, manufactured products, whatever it is, he's just in the business of pushing and promoting America. And when you tell him, yeah, but what about America's allies? You're going to hurt them. I say, I don't care. I'm only concerned with America. Let Macron fight for France's interests. But of course, if he does, we're going to hit France really hard. As I said, we're going to slap 100% tariffs on imports of champagne from France.
And cognac.
Yeah, well, yeah, whatever.
I think there already is a tariff on cognac.
Yes, or cognac, everything. So we're going to make it even more expensive. So he can, so go ahead, fight for your corner. Anyway, let's take a look at some of the questions on our locals community, the people who basically keep Buddy and Apple in clover. They're supporting Buddy and Apple. So thank you. So Stone River, thank you very much. Very generosity says, so Trump is an international relations realist. It's all about power. I think he is a realist. I think that
not when it comes to Israel, but yeah.
No, that's a very good point. I think well, not when it comes to Israel. I think that's an important caveat. But what is, I think, different from what distinguishes Trump from everybody else who has been president in recent times, and it does distinguish him from Biden. He never talks in any moralistic terms. I've never heard him talk about human rights. He has never talked about who's good and who's bad in the world. Whether America's on the side of good or America's on the side of human rights or social justice, the democracy. He never talks about it like that. He always approaches every issue just in terms of self-interested players. And obviously, since he represents America, then he's interested in advancing America's interests. So, when he approaches this war in Ukraine, You never hear him moralizing. You never say to him, "Oh, Russia behaved terribly. Russia, Ukraine's sovereignty and democracy were violated. Russia is terrible and Putin is terrible." On the contrary, whenever he talks about Putin, he said, "I had very good relations with Putin." That's all he ever says. I had very good relations with him. So he never looks at anything other than Israel. And I think it's a very important issue other than in that completely realist framework. Now, whether that will lead to a different outcome, that's a different issue. But he does approach, I think, international affairs in a very different way from Biden or Obama and his predecessors, George W. Bush.
And absolutely, and that goes back to how he views NATO. Is it what is the U.S. getting out of this? We seem to be paying a lot, and then we have the Europeans spouting off about human rights and sovereignty and all of that. Well, if that's important to you, then take over. It's yours. Okay.
Right.
But like, I don't want to sound like we're contradicting ourselves. The countervailing trends against Trump changing policy in Ukraine it's enormous here. But overall, Anthony Blinken, believe it or not, he has this farewell essay in Foreign Affairs, and it really kind of turns your stomach. I mean, this guy is completely out of his mind. And we rebonded with our relations with Europe and our partners. No, you haven't. Okay, you've actually done the worst. You've done the worst of all possible things. You've made them supplicants, and then you humiliate them, and then you take whatever surplus they have, and as a benefit to the United States. That's what's already happened. You're not using that rhetoric. Now, Trump's going to come in January and do exactly the same thing with a different rhetoric. And it'll be very realist.
Yes.
If Trump is having a problem, well, that's his problem. It's not I'm not the president of France. He is.
Right. No, that's right. It's a very interesting. I mean, Trump kind of returned to a kind of very much a Republican realist attitude to international affairs, as highlighted by Nixon and Eisenhower before it kind of went off the rails to a certain extent under Reagan, but he really went off the rails under the two Bushes. But I think Trump has returned to that kind of very realistic view of world affairs. I think as Eisenhower and Nixon, and I see Trump very much within that tradition. Of course, in the days of Eisenhower and Nixon, the Soviet Union was around, and the Americans were afraid of the Soviet Union. And in those days, the Soviet Union enjoyed this huge reputation because it was only a few years after their overwhelming destruction of the Wehrmacht. And so everyone, you don't want to mess with these people. Look what they did to the Wehrmacht. And I think that's what really induced caution on the part of Eisenhower and Nixon. That is gone. I mean, if you remember, like we talk about Dr. Strangelove, you remember even in that moment when General Turgidson, although he hates the Ruskies, he started to say, well, hey, but you saw what they did in Stalingrad. You don't want to mess with these people. So even General Turgidson, however much he hated the Ruskies, brings up what they did to the Germans at Stalingrad. So that was
also, I don't know how much this informs Trump per se or the people that are surrounding him, but the Ukraine issue is extremely important, and it's not self-evident when you talk about Panama and we talk about Greenland. It's not self-evident, but there are powers that can resist and push back. Okay, and Ukraine is that example right now. And American realists, again, not saying right or wrong, see that this is the time to fortify Fortress America and the corollaries that were part of it: control of the entire Western Hemisphere, why there's an appetite for Greenland, why there must be maximum pressure again on Iran, and any just this is a matter of practical assessment here. Iran can develop a nuclear weapon at will, anytime it wants. Okay.
Well, I don't know about that. I mean, because
I think so. I definitely think so.
Okay. I think if they tried that, they would be subject to an attack. America would attack Iran.
George,
I mean,
it's not inconceivable that they have all of the parts already.
it's
Okay, it hasn't
inconceivable. No, it's not inconceivable, but it's also, you can say, it's very much conceivable that if the United States suspected that Iran was on the brink of acquiring nuclear weapons, that it would attack the places where it believed Iran had the nuclear weapons. I don't think the United States will sit on its hands and allow Iran to become a nuclear power. I mean,
that's why
it's possible, but it would be a very I mean, for Iran to break out as a nuclear power, it would really have to really lay the groundwork. It would have to distribute all its nuclear facilities. It would have to have a number of nuclear warheads, a number of missiles that can reach the United States. Otherwise, the Americans are just going to launch a preemptive attack.
we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see.
Okay. We'll see.
But anyway, Cynthia, a very good friend. Thank you.
I'm not going to argue with George on this because neither one of us have enough facts.
No,
to make
the
case. Neither one of us.
Anyway, Cynthia, very good to see you. And Cynthia's question, thank you very much for your generosity, Cynthia. And she says, the fact that Israel is the only country from the West that's fully exempt from having to abide by all Western sanctions imposed on Russia, is that right? Yeah, okay, well, anyway, we'll go on. Have anything to do with Israel's becoming by far the biggest winner in Syria following the fall of Assad? If so, shouldn't it be advantageous for every Western country to find some way to exempt itself from having to abide by all Western sanctions imposed on Russia and on any other country that the West wants to cripple financially? Let me just read that in. The fact that Israel is the only country from the West that's fully exempt from having to abide by all Western sanctions imposed on Russia, does it have anything to do with the fact that Israel becomes the far biggest winner in Syria following the fall of Assad? If so, shouldn't it be advantageous for every Western country to find some way to exempt itself from having to abide by all Western sanctions imposed on Russia and on any country that the West wants to cripple financially? Well, Israel has always had an exemption. I mean, it's always a special case. No one has ever made any demand on Israel that it should go along with sanctions. And the same applies to Turkey. Turkey hasn't gone along with sanctions, though it's a part of NATO. So it's a special dispensation. It always applies to Israel. And then the strange thing is, it's never raised. Israel, our greatest ally, all the talk that you hear, our greatest friend in the world, and all those Mark Levins and Sean Hannity and all the rest of them. But they never say, yeah, but you notice Israel hasn't imposed any sanctions on Russia. And Israel has quite friendly relations, even on Netanyahu. Your good friend Bibi has quite good relations with Putin. So Israel is never subjected to that. So I think that predates anything that happens just now in Syria. I mean, it's just Israel always gets a special dispensation. It can do whatever it wants. So I mean, America is absolutely bound to come to Israel's assistance at any time, no questions asked. But Israel is never under any obligation to do the same for America.
And also, when you talk about sanctions, you have to remember the European Union. George, what is it? It's the 15th or 16th or 17th round of sanctions. I mean, like Europeans have their own sanction regime here. It's right. Separate from the United States. There's a confluence, obviously, but these are countries that are willing. They're always prodding. Serbia is not a member of the EU, but prodding them to go along with it. Right. I mean, a big snafu, and maybe we should do it later in the week. What's going on with energy politics in Eastern Europe, Slovakia, Hungary, and Poland, Ukraine. This is a frickin' train wreck for everybody involved, all because of sanctions, okay? So, and again, we see the sanction regime crippling EU members, okay? Right. And it's going to come to a head. I mean, the Slovakian prime minister was in Moscow, I think, yesterday or today. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And this is really existential. But everything George said about Israel is absolutely right. I mean, it's just always an asterisk against after Israel. It doesn't apply. Okay, non-applicable.
But that's again the interesting thing is that it's very much one-way traffic. I mean, so when Trump raises these issues about Panama, which I think you could say, yeah, those are reasonable grounds for complaint. That we did all this for Panama, but Panama is kind of not very friendly to us. It charges us a bomb, doesn't help us on immigration, doesn't help us on drugs. What are we getting out of this? But they don't apply that logic to Israel. So we underwrite Israel, we do whatever Israel wants, but we have no say in what Israel's own policies. Whether it comes to the settlements, when it comes to where how it uses its weapons and against
Kurds.
No say, and we don't even have to ask them to support us on our foreign policy when we want to sanction Russia.
What about the Kurds? I mean, there's going to be butting of heads over that one.
Right. All right. Yeah. No, that's right.
Yeah, but I mean, the question is really important in another way here. Is all of my life up until like the last 15 months, or we'll go back to 2014 with the Maidan coup. All of this talk about human rights, the rule of law, international community, it's all rubbished. It's all destroyed. Okay, we're getting into a very Hobbesian world. Why do you think Trump is talking about Panama? Why do you think he's talking about Greenland? Okay, because the rules don't matter anymore. Okay, right. And when you have such a glaring exception in the case of Israel, most people are just going to shrug their shoulders now and say, your rules, but we have to pay for the implementation of your rules. We lose, and no wonder someone like Trump is saying, Greenland, how big is Denmark?
Right. No, I think that's right. I mean, you basically,
the EU's going to defend them. The EU's going to sanction us. Ha ha ha. This is the Hobbesian world.
Right. Well, it always was a Hobbesian world. I mean, I think international relations always was.
All the talk of, and moving in that direction, that has disappeared as well. That's a legacy of U.S. foreign policy.
Right, but the Hobbesian world always existed. I mean, the only reason why we had an era of stability was, in a sense, the balance of terror between the United States and the Soviet Union. Neither wanted to essentially do anything that would cause a war between the two great nuclear superpowers. That ended. I mean, what we basically seen in Ukraine that has come to an end. And then, of course, we've seen that Israel said, well, we did it. We just go ahead and did it. What are you going to do about it? And then, of course, once you realize, well, nothing. I mean, we're not going to do anything. We're just going to continue. Well, yeah, then essentially Trump or whoever is going to say, well, we're just going to take it. And what are you going to do about it? And so in a way, it's always been a Hobbesian world. We just had a brief interregnum during the Cold War in which we enjoyed stability. And now, we're back in a world of danger and instability.
This is really a legacy of how different renditions of the world that came into being after 1945. And the Soviets had their rendition of it. The Soviet Union doesn't exist anymore. And Russia, for the most part, it's kind of more of a watered down one because it's not ideological anymore, because they're not promoting world revolution. But George is absolutely right. I mean, we're getting into a world that is more familiar to people at the end of the 19th century, early 20th century, up to the First World War. Right. Is it great powers do these things?
Right.
Is it a good thing or a bad thing?
Right.
Well, that's for professors to talk about, okay?
Right. No,
we're very much returning, because what George has said is right, that there was an interregnum. We can pick our dates if you want, okay? 1945 is good enough for me.
Yeah. Right.
And so when you're brought up in that time period, that era, we were taught to believe in a certain narrative as if that is the way it has always
Right.
been for all time. And
No.
no, what we've been for George's life and my life, we've lived in an anomalous era when it comes to international politics. Very anomalous, because of what George said. There was a balance of terror. Both sides was terrified of the other one.
Right.
That's
No,
gone.
that's right.
So
That's right.
we didn't have that before 1939.
Yeah.
Okay,
No,
because
that's right.
there were people were trying to make sense of what Hitler is all about and all of that. Okay, so we're living in an exceptional as in an exception, and not as a rule in international politics.
That's right. Anyway, Cynthia then goes on and says, also, I know Turkey is partially exempt from having to abide by the Western sanctions imposed on Russia, at least when it comes to sanctions involving oil and gas. So do you think this plays any role in Turkey being the only other winner in Syria following the fall of Assad? If so, this once again sends a clear message to all other Western countries that you'll be much better off if you find some way to exempt yourself from having to abide by any Western sanctions imposed
But you
on.
really, if you don't have power and assets, you can't exempt yourself. Okay, there are very few exemptions that are recognized. The United States is not going to sanction Syria, Turkey over this because NATO membership. It's the largest military in Europe in NATO in Europe. Okay. Everyone has a lot of pieces to move on the board. Now, who's the biggest beneficiary? Last week on my program, on both programs, I asked the following question. What will prevail in post-Assad Syria, post-destruction of Syria? Zionism, neo-Ottomanism, or American hegemony? Because they're all going to bump heads, all of them. There's no intermingling and very little tolerance of. Remember, Erdogan, and this is part of the public record, Jerusalem is part of his agenda. Jerusalem, everyone. Israel, or at least some members of the current government, sees Damascus is part of Israel. Okay? Okay, and then the Americans, well, they're not, what is it? Americans don't conquer the world for tourism, but they end up being tourists. Okay, they're not really particularly interested in a city or whatnot. They're interested in a balance of power. And so,
well, I think in this case, I think it's for Americans, I think it's a vital strategic basis. I mean, they're going to take that and it'll be their strategic operation. Yeah.
Exactly.
I mean, they're not going to just leave Syria and allow Turkey and Israel to carve the country.
No way. No way. And particularly since the United States is on, at least officially speaking, on good terms with both. So it's in a perfect broker position.
Right.
Okay. Yeah. American troops are flooding into Syria as we speak right now.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, obviously, Turkey has always enjoyed this, but again, the special dispensation because big country, a highly strategic location. I mean, they control the Dardanelles Straits, and therefore they control the shipping that goes in and out of the Black Sea. There's also the question that the Americans have been particularly concerned about is you have a Muslim population, and you never know which way the Muslim population is going to go. I mean, it was easier in the days of the Ataturk dominated Turkey. They were very Western, and they always, they were very secular. We don't have anything to do with Islam. But now with this Islamized Turkey, the Americans always have to worry about which way is Turkey going to go, because Erdogan has completely abandoned the whole Ataturkian tradition in Turkey. So you have to sort of worry they don't want to get this huge country, this quite wealthy, quite prosperous, strategic country, becoming totally Islamicized. So that's another consideration why Turkey gets this special dispensation.
Yeah, and they know that Erdogan, he, we've chronicled it here on this podcast. I mean, who knows what Erdogan's going to be up to next? Okay,
Yeah.
he's a wild card. He's very much a wild card, and and those that say that Erdogan has betrayed the Palestinian cause, on the face of it, I absolutely agree. But if you get into the mindset of the Ottoman Empire, is that Palestine belongs to the Ottomans,
Right.
and the Turks are the successors.
The
And
Turks
so,
are the yes.
and what they do is they believe that that place, not the people per se, but that place belongs within their purview. And that's
Right.
why the support of Palestine, they're thinking in terms of geography more than anything else. Okay.
Well,
Not
that's the thing. They don't care about Arabs. I mean, remember
no,
they
they,
were
yeah, they
exactly.
don't care about Arabs.
They don't care about Arabs. I mean, they despise the Arabs. They ruled over the Arabs for centuries. So therefore, they don't care very much about Palestinian rights. I mean, but you're right. This was all part of once the Ottoman Empire, and it basically Erdogan has championed this neo-Ottomanism, restoring in whatever way he can the Ottoman rule. So
To prove the point is that Damascus was a key city in the Ottoman Empire. And Erdogan would like it back. The fact that Arabs live there, well, that's a problem, but we want it back.
yeah, exactly. Stone River goes on. Thank you very much, Stone River. He says in a newspaper headline, Trump offers greenbacks for Greenland. That's pretty good. That's not bad. Greenbacks for Greenland. And so the one other thing that I wanted to raise, Peter, was this increasingly deteriorating relationship between Hungary and Poland. It's really quite. I don't think there are two states in Europe that now have quite such a hostile, antagonistic relationship than Hungary and Poland do. Because they're both members of NATO, they're both members of the EU, and so what happened within the last 2 weeks? I mean, they've each, whether it was Tusk or Orban, they've been trading barbs for quite some time, with Tusk making all sorts of accusations, saying, "Oh, Putin, Orban's in love with Putin," and all that. But what happened was that Hungary offered political asylum to a former Polish minister whom the Tusk government wants to prosecute. That's quite a step for, again, you can offer political asylum, but for a NATO and EU ally, say, yeah, we're offering you political asylum. And Orban has done this, but not. I mean, he did offer asylum to a Macedonian politician who fled. I guess it's now called North Macedonia, and then briefly they didn't go very well. He at least offered some help to Bolsonaro when it seemed that the government was going after Bolsonaro. He spent several nights in the Hungarian embassy in Brasilia. But obviously, there's no way they could look after him in there. They couldn't fly him out, so he had to leave the embassy. But here I just want to show you this. So it starts off with this interview with this man Gergely Gulyás, who's a one of these Hungarian minister. And then he says, this in this interview with Mandina, which is a kind of a Hungarian news site. He says the former Polish deputy minister Marcin Romanowski has been granted political asylum in Hungary. The minister heading the prime minister's office confirmed to our newspaper. We asked about the details of the case. And then he says that following Polish rumors, the Hungarian press also reported that Romanowski had arrived in Hungary. Is this information true? And said, yes, the former Polish deputy minister did indeed come to Hungary and request political asylum from the Hungarian state. He was granted it in accordance with Hungarian and EU law. In this case, there is concrete evidence of a lack of a fair trial, as he was arrested this summer despite his immunity as a member of the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe. He was only released after the Assembly's president formally protested to the Polish authorities, and a Polish court later confirmed that the arrest was unlawful. And then the question is, although Romanowski was arrested despite his immunity, the politician is suspected of very serious crimes in his home country that damage state property. Are the charges justified? The Hungarian state cannot look into these proceedings conducted by authorities of another country. We cannot take a position on the merits of the accusation either. However, this is a matter of political asylum, which can be granted if the impartial and politically influenced adjudication of the person concerned case is not assured beyond all doubt in his or her country. The risk exists today in general and based on the procedure so far in the specific case in Poland. And then question.
That didn't say very much.
It didn't say very much, but I mean, so this is unlikely to improve relations between the two governments. Hasn't this been considered? We have been saying the same thing about asylum seekers since 2015. If someone is fleeing war or is threatened with persecution for political reason, as was the case with former Macedonian Prime Minister Nikola Gruevski, then refugee status must be secured, even if there are political disputes. This is the difference between migration and supporting of refugees. And so this is Politico, of course, charges in. Orban infuriates Warsaw by granting political asylum to former Polish minister. Poland's foreign ministry calls the Hungarian government.
It must be fun working for Politico to write.
Yeah. They don't really do. Yeah, they don't do too much journalism there. I mean, it's all just permanent hysteria. So Poland's foreign ministry calls the Hungarian government's decision a hostile step and an insult to Polish authorities. That's a serious in diplomatic jargon when you say that we consider your action as hostile and unfriendly. That's a very serious thing.
Yeah, because it's usually reserved for Russia. Yeah,
exactly. Exactly. Yeah, I mean it's it is reserved for Russia. So it says Poland's government reacted with rage to a decision by Hungary's government to grant political asylum to fugitive former Polish deputy justice minister, and then the moves
a fugitive
to fugitive. Yeah,
right. It's very small. Okay.
Yeah. Budapest announced the asylum. The move marks a further breakdown in relations between Poland and Hungary, with Polish Foreign Minister Radoslaw Sikorski calling it an unfriendly step by Prime Minister Viktor Orban's populist government.
Yeah, from the most unfriendly person on the planet. Okay.
Exactly. And then it says Sikorski's ministry summoned the Hungarian ambassador on Friday morning. We consider the decision to grant political asylum to Marcin Romanowski, who is wanted under a European arrest warrant, to be an act hostile to the Republic of Poland and contrary to the elementary principles binding the member states of the European Union, the foreign ministry said in a statement. Justifying this decision with alleged political persecution is an insult to citizens and Polish authorities, it added. And then said Romanowski is an MP with the opposition Law and Justice Party, faces 11 charges in Poland for misuse of public funds when he was Deputy Justice Minister from 2019 to 2023. Over the summer, the Polish Parliament lifted his immunity And on Thursday, a Warsaw court issued a European arrest warrant. And then in the video message, Romanowski accused Tusk and Justice Minister Adam Bodnar of illegally usurping power and of improperly prosecuting him. Tusk's government has launched a campaign to prosecute officials from the previous government accused of wrongdoing.
This has been going on for years. Both sides accusing the other. It's like a soap opera.
Right, but there's enough here to suggest that this is a political prosecution. So I mean, if you're talking about the legality of an asylum, you say, well, look, I mean, it's clear that Tusk is seeking to prosecute the members of his previous government. In other words, he's seeking to prosecute his political opponents. Then you can say, okay, we don't know about the merits of the charges, but you can say it sounds like a political prosecution. We're going to offer asylum. So it's not unreasonable. It's not quite when we talked about Saudi Arabia and Germany the day when he's wanted for rape and serious crimes. But this is clearly a political fight that's going on in Warsaw.
Yes, I mean the politically charged prosecutions has become the norm in Poland. Okay,
right,
over the last few years.
Right. And then so now Tusk is now speaking. Tusk says he denounced the Hungarian decision, comparing the government in Budapest to Alexander Lukashenko's dictatorship in Belarus. Quote, I did not
behind the collar there, huh?
Yeah, I did not expect that corrupt officials fleeing justice could choose between Lukashenko and Orban in seeking refuge from justice. And then Poland recalls ambassadors. So Poland has now recalled its ambassador to Hungary over fugitive asylum case. And then the Polish ambassador has been recalled to Warsaw indefinitely, a day after Hungary granted asylum. And then it goes on. Hours before Romanowski's lawyer announced the lawmaker had been granted asylum in Hungary, Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk warned against Budapest taking any, quote, odd decisions, unquote. Should Budapest take any odd decisions that would be inconsistent with the European law, such as granting political asylum or ignoring the European arrest warrant, Viktor Orban would be the one in a precarious position, not me. So that's a threat issued. He'd be in a precarious position, not me. I wonder what he means by a precarious position. You're going to do the regime change routine, but he's already been subjected to innumerable regime change operations. I mean, we had, what's her name, Samantha Power coming here, was about a year ago, whatever, doling out money to all the opposition figures. Hey, come on over. Would you like $1 million? Yeah, thank you. Okay, well, just go ahead and do your civil law, whatever, organization thing. I mean, so I don't know what else they can do to Viktor Orban. But nonetheless, I think it's interesting that this, the whole story, I mean, we've talked about this before, the myth of this Polish-Hungarian friendship.
Yeah,
it's totally made up. You're going.
Totally. Well, I mean, why is it totally made up? Because, well, I've lived in Poland for over 10 years, and I was very lucky and fortunate to live in Hungary for about almost 9 months. I loved Budapest. Okay, I didn't get to know very many Hungarians. They're not chatty people.
No,
that was not at all.
Not a friendly bunch.
No, not chatty. But there's the Poles used to talk about it as that they're a great fraternal friendship with the Hungarians, the only people that understand us. And it was probably not politically correct, but I just said, well, all of Hungary's neighbors hate Hungarians. All of Poland's neighbors hate Poles. And you guys don't border each other. So maybe that's why, okay? Because there's nothing about the two countries that are really similar. I mean, certainly not the language, okay?
No.
Not at all.
No. No.
Maybe that one similarity is that there was a time where Poles lorded over minorities on its periphery, and the Austro-Hungarian Empire, they did the same. So
But
the
this,
I
but this is, yeah.
don't know
But
where it
this is,
comes from. It's even mentioned in Polish literature about their fraternal friends in Hungary.
yeah, no,
So
it's one of these things that you always hear about, and then you look at history and you say, okay, it's true that in 1848, 49, they both fought against the Russians in separate wars, and they were both put down by the Russians. But then if you look at subsequent history, so they were essentially on opposite sides in the two world wars, and now Poland was kind of created after World War One. They sort of recreated the Entente, the victorious Entente powers, but the Triple Alliance powers, Germany, Austria, Hungary, they also planned to create a Poland, but a much smaller Poland, because they were much more interested in Ukraine. They realized Ukraine, hey, that's the key. If you if you want to make life difficult for the Poles and for the Russians, they didn't really trust the Poles, but that the key is the Ukrainians. But during between the war years, between World War One and World War Two, again, Poland was a well-satisfied power. I mean, they'd got a lot of land. Hungary was one of the dissatisfied powers and wanted to overturn the World War One treaties. And exactly, became very small. So again, World War Two they were on opposite sides, and then of course even now then they clearly have very different takes on Russia. I mean, it's absolutely very different. And so where's this great alliance? Where's this great friendship? I mean, you can see when you look at history that, well, on many times and on many issues, they've taken very divergently, sharply divergent positions.
well, also Tusk, you remember? I mean, he is the ultimate Europhile in
Exactly.
Poland. I mean,
Yeah.
huge. I mean,
Right.
that's his DNA.
Right.
Okay, he's not even Polish. I mean, he's um, Kashubin. He's a Kashub. Okay, which is a very tiny minority in Poland. Hence the name Tusk. It's not a very Polish name.
No.
Um, and he represents Brussels. He's the enforcer for Brussels, and
Right.
he's scoring points
Sure.
looking at Brussels. Okay,
Yep.
that's how far the Hungarian-Polish relationship goes. I mean, he's dumping on Orbán because he can.
Right. Exactly. Now, the predecessor government, this Law and Justice Party, so there was a certain amount of good relations, but it was just simply that they were both uh,
Odd
Fidesz.
man out.
Yeah, they were socially conservative, but that became very frayed after February 2022. So yeah, they had similar views on families, marriage, gay stuff. But when it came to Russia, they already had took sharply different views. And of course, you're absolutely right. I mean, the Poland, is basically very much in with America, with Brussels, with NATO, and everything else. And Hungary has kind of taken I think a much more of a traditional view. I mean, Hungary, it's a Central European power. It had been, it's part of Austria-Hungary. It was, friendly relations with Germany. So Hungary again maintains a certain independence and equidistance from Brussels and towards Moscow, and basically said, well, we don't want to choose between Brussels and Moscow. I mean, yeah, I mean, obviously they have chosen as part of NATO and the EU, but we're not going to go down the path of cultivating bad relations with Moscow.
Yeah, well, it's not a good look for the EU, okay? Because like, what is the jurisdiction? Is it the EU jurisdiction? What is the jurisdictions that the Poles have, the Hungarians have? It's just not really a good look. There's all this bickering going on. I'm not going Romanovsky. I'm not going to go one way or another if he's
Who the hell
guilty of
knows?
being.
I mean, and the Hungarians are saying we don't know. I mean,
I
whether
do
he's
know,
guilty or not.
and you and I have been talking about this for years. I mean, the petty politics that go on in particularly in Poland, you know, and then, you know, Russia is, you know, Russia Gate is part of Poland's DNA. I mean, there's
Right.
always Russia Gate. Okay,
Right. Right.
it's the air they breathe.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
and it's very tiresome. It's really petty. And you know, I have to say, in all honesty, during the time that I lived there, I just had no respect for the so-called Polish intelligentsia. Okay, at all.
Yes, no, that's right. It's very very interesting. I think it was the Law and Justice Party. Remember, they were planning to prosecute members of the Tusk Party for
Right.
having
That's
too
what I mean.
friendly towards Russia. Yeah,
That's what I mean.
yeah, that's right. You know, they were. Yeah, no, that's right. I think we did a gaggle.
I mean, it's always lustration. There's always lustration
That's
going
right.
on.
Yeah, yeah. So and it's always so loony. You know, you're attacking the people who are rabidly rabidly Russophobes, and you're accusing them of being too friendly towards Russia. I mean, it's insane. But nonetheless, it's kind of interesting because I don't know whether this has ever happened, whereby one EU member state has granted political asylum to a minister, a former minister of another EU member state. I mean, North Macedonia was not an EU member state, so it's quite a remarkable thing. So the Poles, you know, they can fulminate and they'll go on fulminating. Oh, Orban is Putin's best friend. You know, he's another Lukashenko. Just it's water off a duck's back.
Yeah. Okay. You want a Russia Gate to Orban? Well, it's already been done. I mean, there's nothing new under the sun here. I mean, it's just petty politics, the way I look at it. I mean, is Orban doing it to stick his finger in the eye of the Poles? Yeah. Is he doing it to piss off the Brussels? Yeah.
Right.
But what else is new, everybody? I mean,
right. No,
my point is that, you know, there's a weird jurisdiction problem going on here, and Orban's pointing it out to everybody. Okay, so
right.
So our sovereignty doesn't include asylum now, but you want us to give asylum to people from Syria, but we can't give asylum to a European.
That's a very good point. Exactly. Yeah. That's an excellent point. They're continually demanding that Hungary opens this country up to migrants. They're going beyond just simply demanding this. They're actually
and George said the word
of Hungary.
George said the word migrants.
Right.
Not asylum seekers.
Right.
Migrants.
Right. Exactly. That's right. But you're making constant demands. Oh, that's perfectly reasonable. Bring it, you know, that you house thousands of migrants in our country. But when it comes to somebody who's we deem to be a victim of political prosecution, that's off the table. That's outrageous. And again, it's Hungary's fine. It's getting hit with hefty fines for its policy of not allowing in migrants. So Hungary's actually paying quite a heavy price. And we have to say Poland has generally been very unfriendly towards Hungary because Tusk is repeatedly insulting Orban with all these cracks about Putin and whatever. So Hungary doesn't owe anything to Poland.
And also, it's something we've mentioned before. And my read of this here is that Tusk is standing in to be the Brussels enforcer in Eastern Europe, because the Poles, what really rings well in their ears when there's going to be a trilateral commission. It's going to be the French, the Germans, and the Poles. The Poles love that. Oh, we're at the adult table. We're at the adult table, and they want to be at the adult table. Okay, because they despise their neighbors. They all. I mean, it's one of the things that it's so bewildering. And I've even got Poles that hate Russia. Right. By the way, that hate Russia even to agree with me and said, well, we never liked Ukrainians either. Okay. No. And this great love between these two fraternal people, that's a complete myth. That was made up in February 2022.
Right,
Okay,
right,
it
right.
never existed before that. Oh, no, for Russians and Poles and Ukrainians, you got to be joking.
Okay. There, yeah, no, that's right. And then you go, the Poles will say, "Hey, we've done all this for you, for the Ukrainians. How about basically return to us the bodies of Poles who were killed at Volhynia." They bring this up because that's the sole point. The Ukrainians say, no, not going to cooperate on that one. So you know what, you can just sort of return these bodies to us. No, that's going to happen. So yeah, there's a lot of bad feelings there, and the Poles, they don't really forget these things. They bring up, how they do all this. Ukraine, they only like Ukraine because it's anti-Russian. That's the only reason they're supporting Ukraine, because it's supporting Russians. And then they bring up, well, what about Volhynia? And then right away, Ukraine is, we're not going to discuss that one. And then again, the Poles, great allies, our great allies with the Germans. Well, that was the previous Polish government who said, "Hey, can you give us some $1.3 trillion in as wartime compensation?" And the German says, nine danke. But at least Tusk has abandoned that. I mean, Tusk wants to maintain his relations with Berlin. But you notice again, you get another Polish government in and say, "Yeah, we want some money from Germany. Give us some money for reconstruction aid."
Well, that's also one of the important legacies that has come to light, but people are extremely uncomfortable about it. And that's the events that happened during the Second World War. There are some historians, and I'm not going to necessarily agree. I'm intrigued, is that there were many wars in Europe between 1939 or 1941 for the Soviet Union to 1945. There was a lot of interesting fighting within Ukraine, collaboration. Collaboration is because of the Cold War, everything gets shut down.
Right.
Everything's shut down.
Right.
The go through European newspapers in the 1930s. On the whole, they were very pro-Nazi, very pro-Nazi. Hitler and his reforms and his party, they're getting things straightened out there. Okay, and then with the war, of course, we have to change the narrative. And then the Cold War froze everything, just two blocks. Okay, the Hungarians, they were victims. Oh no, they worked very willingly with the Nazis. Okay, and they had their own fascist regime. The Polish colonels were no better, at least in my opinion, in Poland. And we can go on and on and on. And now, with this new focus on Russia and the end of the Cold War, history kind of percolates up to the surface, and there's a lot of questions about what did grandfather do during the war? Okay, why is he wearing a German uniform? That's strange. Okay, all those things are percolating upward, and they don't want to talk about it because it's an inconvenient narrative. But Eastern Europe in the 20th century, particularly from 1939 to 1945, was hell on earth. Okay, a very, very nasty place, and not just because of the Wehrmacht, and not just because of the Red Army.
Yeah. Well, there was they kind of created a problem for themselves by essentially having knocked out all of the empires. The German Empire is gone, the Ottoman Empire is gone, the Austro-Hungarian Empire is gone, the Russian Empire is gone. So all the empires are gone, and then they cobbled together various artificial states that
with huge minorities.
Exactly, they considered a minority, and they were artificially created, and all it required was a power to come and start applying a little bit of pressure, and of course that's what Germany did. Germany was very, very good at that. They applied a bit, you push a little bit, and then the whole thing comes crashing down. But that thing that the Germans did, that's been taken over by the Americans and the British and NATO, which is you play off minorities against one another. You hit the fissures of these societies, and then you look what happens. and they've done this in many different places. They're very well in the Middle East, playing all these different groups off against another. And of course, they've done this very well in Eastern Europe and in Ukraine. And so, essentially, it's a technique that was mastered by Germany, Imperial Germany, and then Hitler, of course, was brilliant at it. And of course, the Americans had taken this over.
Well, let's be historically fair. Stalin did it too within the Soviet
Oh yeah,
Union.
no, exactly. That's right.
Yeah, but see, it's really interesting because in the nationalities, how did the Soviets? It was the nationalities question. Yes, the
Right.
nationalities question. Well, on the surface, it sounds good. Self-determination. Everybody has their language and their culture. Well, no. The question about nationality is how do you use it for political gain? Okay.
Right. Right. No,
And everybody that, as George alluded to, the post-World War I settlement was a complete disaster because there was huge ethnic minorities in these newly formed countries. And then add on the double whammy where these countries were created in a security system in which initially Germany was not allowed into because it was a defeated power, and the Soviet Union was not allowed in because it was communist. And so you had an international system that was grossly unstable. And then on top of it, you have the French and the British saying they want to create these countries in the East as a balance to a possible resurgence in Germany, but they don't give it any security guarantees. And
well, I did get, yeah,
but in the game they did, but not
right. But that was the point is that was always a foolish thing to do because ultimately the security guarantees you couldn't do it. I mean, they didn't have the strength, they didn't have the will. I mean, it was pointless. So essentially, they created these states. But they were never going to go to war on behalf of these states. They just couldn't do it, and so that's why the security guarantee was wholly pointless.
And on top of it, insult to injury, just to make the point even clearer, is that when Czechoslovakia was being carved up, who else participated? Poland did. Okay, yeah. They went after each other. Okay, right. And maybe this is a kind of a long segue to get to the present. That history should be kept in mind when there is some kind of settlement in Ukraine.
Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah. Well, yeah. Well, yeah. Well,
George, we have many podcasts ahead. Okay.
Exactly. Anyway, I think we're out of time now, Peter. So thank you very much, everybody, all the Gagglers who joined us, and everybody else, the non-Gagglers, who joined us through YouTube and Rumble and Twitter. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for all these great questions. Thank you, of course, those who contributed to Buddy and Apple's well-being. Buddy's never, an Apple are not going to say thank you. That's just, hey, this is their entitlement. They never say thank you. But thank you so much. Please join me tomorrow, Christmas Eve, which is 3 p.m. Eastern time. I'm going to do my solo. That's right. Hey, I could use more. That's easy. Hey, how about some more? So 3 p.m. Eastern time. Please join me, and look forward to come with questions and comments and everything. And we will be back 1 week from today, and so look forward to seeing you then. Until then, from Peter, because I'll see you tomorrow, but from Peter, Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. All the best. Bye-bye.